Hi, it's Sari. So I wanted to do a live Q&A today with it being World Mental Health Day. And the reason, well, there's a few reasons why I want to do it. One, because I like doing Q&As anyway, and I like to be able to reach more people. But also because today is a day where it's called World Mental Health Day, but actually what we tend to focus on and talk about is how we feel we're mentally ill or stuck or broken. And actually, I really feel that World Mental Health Day should be much more about celebrating our innate well-being and our mental health that we have access to all the time. It's just that sometimes we don't see it as clearly because we are in a situation of overwhelm and we're overthinking things or whatever it is that's going on. But hi, Denise. But say hi if you're there. I can see there's people there. Say hi. And also, please feel free to pop any questions at all that you have in the comments, because that's what I'm here for, to answer your questions. Hi, Anne-Marie. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like when I was training as a psychotherapist, actually, a lot of my training, as you can imagine, or if anyone out there has trained in psychotherapy or anything like that, the majority of my training was about understanding what's wrong with people, what could be wrong with people, how that then might link to their upbringing, how that then might link to their feelings and emotions. And yes, some of it was about thought, but I actually never ever once through my training was ever talked about how innately we are well and that we have access to mental health all the time. We don't always see it, doesn't always feel like that, but it is there. We're not born having lots of anxious thinking, for example. So that's what I want to talk to. I want to talk about the good stuff. I want to talk about how innately we have the capacity and the ability to make any changes really that we want without even having to be motivated particularly, because we have that ability within us. But what happens a lot of the time is, well, we just have a complete misunderstanding about human nature, how it works, how thoughts work, and we can get so stuck and lost in that. I have been many times in the past. And, as I say, training as a psychotherapist and working as a psychotherapist, I can tell you lots of things about lots of different types of disorders. And actually, having worked in this new way with the three principles and coaching in a different way, I'm not actually that interested in the nicest possible way about a diagnosis as such, or about which disorder or what traits you might be showing or displaying and all of that stuff. What I'm interested in is showing you, helping you explore a lot more about how, oh, some familiar faces popping up. Hi. About how we access that innate well-being, how we understand more about how thoughts work, rather than getting stuck in and trapped in this idea that we are a certain way and that that's how we've always been, that's how we're always going to be, and seeing ourselves as these broken people that literally are quite possibly at times feeling like we're completely unfixable when we're absolutely not. So I would love it if anyone has any questions at all. I'd be interested to know if you, on a day like today, I can imagine could actually be quite triggering in some ways for some people, because everything in our news feed is mental health, mental health, mental health. But it's not really about mental health, it's about mental illness. So we're hearing lots of things about mental illness. If you are anxious, if you are lonely, if you are this, if you are that, if you struggle, all of that stuff, which is fine. But actually, what about educating and letting people know that actually they might at times feel like they have no one, they might at times feel isolated and alone, but if they understood more about human nature and how thought works, then actually they could have so much more peace with where they're at in that given moment to make things slightly easier for them. So I'd also be interested in hearing what your view on stuff like today is. It is great for getting the message out there, getting people talking. For this, I would love people to share this video. mainly because I want people that are maybe sat at home thinking that they're broken and they've got anxiety and they've had anxiety for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is, to realize that that is not who they now are, and that is not how the next 10 years of their life has to continue. And you'll hear me say this so many times, that learning about these 3 principles completely changed my own life. But that doesn't mean that I don't get anxious, because I'm a human being. So I have anxious thinking. I can get lost in anxious thinking. But the difference now is that it doesn't scare me, because a lot of people who see themselves as having a mental illness, particularly around anxiety, is often what they will then believe is that they're in this cycle that they can't get out of, and it's just something that they have to live with and deal with and manage. Well, it's something that we all have to manage and deal with, because it's part of being human. But what isn't part of the natural kind of rhythm of human nature and thought is being scared of getting anxious. So when that cycle becomes about being anxious about getting anxious, or fearful of your own health, then that's where it's different, and that's where it doesn't have to be like that. So it's not about saying, you know, right, let's cure people from anxiety and worry and stress. Like, we can't, because we're not robots. But we don't need to be living our lives in constant fear of feeling like we're going to break and we're unfixable, and that we just have to live a semi-okay life because we believe that's all we're capable of, because we're absolutely not. And at the times where we feel like we're not capable of living life to the fullest, that's because that's what we're thinking at that moment. So we are telling ourselves that we are not capable. We are telling ourselves that this is how we are. We are telling, all of that thought is directed in that way of that this is me, I'm unfixable. That's then going to create feelings that feel like you're unfixable. And it's not true. It's just feelings and that you've created through your thinking. So somebody asked me a question earlier on the post when I said I was initially going to do this, and I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but it was kind of like, where do I see myself? And I don't know if it was meant on a personal or a professional level in the future with regards to mental health. I mean, my work and my personal situation has changed a lot, actually, now that I've used these 3 principles. But what I would like to see, in a nutshell, is I would like to see us as a community, as a race of human beings, is to stop falling into this trap of massively overcomplicating anything to do with our mental health. All of this categorizing of each other, and, you know, if I had £1 for every time I've spoken to someone or worked with someone who has told me that they have a certain diagnosis, and then they believe that that's what they're then living with, and lots of things then happen as a result of that they don't believe that they can change. And then I've known people who've been diagnosed with OCD, for example, who then suddenly don't see themselves as having OCD, and it's like, oh well, how, I've got rid of it. No, it wasn't there in the first place. It was something that was created through a heck of a lot of overthinking, overwhelm, that then creates patterns of things that we do in relation to that. So hang on, let's put here, that's how you feel going round, struggle most days with thoughts very low. You see, yeah, because our thinking, and the 3 principles, for those of you that have never come across them, are mind, thought and consciousness. Now, I'm just pasting in the comments, actually, because if you want, I can send you a half-hour video. If any of this sounds like it might be of interest to you, I can send you a half-an-hour video. If you just pop your email in, there's a link there, I'll pin it to the top. You can find out a little bit more about it, but it's mind, thought and consciousness. And actually, our moods affect our thinking can then affect our mood. So it can often feel like a vicious cycle that we're in. And even though I know in those moments and those days where you're feeling probably extremely overwhelmed, I know, because I know that you're human, that there will be some moments of clarity in that day, but you're not seeing them that clearly, because the noise of all the chatter in your head and all the overthinking, and why am I still like this, and why is everybody else seem to be okay, and why this and why that, that is completely drowning out that kind of little voice that's like, okay, well, maybe you need to do this, or maybe you need to do that. And the part of you that knows kind of what to do on some level it's being ignored, and you're focusing on the part that is kind of in overwhelm and is concerned and worried and feeling completely stuck. There will be moments of clarity. There absolutely will. There always is. I love it. It's helped me so much. The 3 principles. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it does. I get, lots of feedback from it. I know because it's helped me too. And it's kind of like, well, do you know what? When I say to people that are a bit, I wouldn't mind finding out more about these 3 principles, but then I'm a bit hesitant because I've tried lots of things before, and well, why isn't this just going to be the same as all of those? And And it's like, well, we don't have anything to lose, because literally all we're doing is talking about human nature. Like, I've coached people where I don't actually know anything about the history, for example, because I'm not there to work all of that stuff out for them. I'm there to just point them in a direction and highlight that actually maybe there's another way that you could look at things. There's another way that you can experience life, which doesn't involve you telling yourself how it's going to be because of how it's always been, kind of thing. It's about us being open to the idea that actually maybe, just maybe, I could experience something slightly different. One of the things, it's kind of like just really basic examples, like, I don't know, think about something that you really enjoy doing. So if I think, even something as simple as TV programs. I remember when in the summer when I was in the coaching group, and I was like saying, oh, I've got to make sure I finish my coaching call by 9 o'clock because I love watching Love Island. Now, some people think that is the most hideous, awful program ever. And that's okay. They're absolutely allowed to feel like that and to think that about the program. But it's a perfect example of how it's not the program that is making us feel either excited to watch it or like we can't possibly believe someone would watch it. It's kind of, they're 2 very different responses to the exact same program. So it's nothing to do with the program. It's our perception, it's our thoughts, that we're experiencing that program from our own perspective and our own thoughts. Another thing, if you met somebody new for the first time, for example, you might be with a friend and you both meet somebody for the first time, you have a conversation, and then that one of you is kind of like, when they've gone off, oh, weren't they really lovely, really nice person? And the other one's like, oh, I thought they were really strange, I didn't like them. Now, you've both had that same conversation, but you're both experiencing it very differently because you're experiencing it from the inside out. Everything is coming from the inside out. And again, I say to people, when I start working with them, they'll be like, yes, I get that it's inside out. And then they'll be like, but it's not inside out when this happens. And they'll find little areas that you're really kind of attached to, in a way, to seeing that it's, yeah, but it has to be that person always annoys me. I'm always like that when they're there. So it has to be them. It can't be me. I'm fine with other people. But actually, I like people saying that to me when I'm coaching them, because I like them to challenge, because then we can go, okay, well, let's look at it like this. Because actually, you're experiencing every single thing day to day in that moment through your thinking. Every single experience, from the second you open your eyes, even when you're asleep, but from the second you open your eyes, everything you're experiencing is through your thinking. Okay, so someone's put here, I don't know where to start to explain how I feel. I don't know whether I'm anxious, slightly depressed, or both. Okay, you are not alone in that. That is extremely common. And what I would say to you now is, does it matter which of those it is? Okay, and if I was working with you, for example, this might sound awful, but I don't care whether it's anxiety or depression or both. All I care about is that you can wake up in the morning and live your life to the best that you can in that day, and to not feel like something is dragging you and holding you back. And it can be a little bit of a cycle, because I think this is society and culture, and this is, again, sometimes what I find World Mental Health Day can do is like, oh, that's a certain diagnosis, maybe that's mine, maybe I've got this, maybe I've got that. Actually, it doesn't matter. They're just words that are created for certain things. And whether it is anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's OCD, whether it's issues with anger, whatever it is, it's all stemming from your thinking. Okay, so you might have a low mood one day, and one day you might think, oh, I can't cope with this anymore, it's too much, it's too, and then you can start being fearful about the fact that you're worrying that you can't deal with this for much longer. That then will affect your mood, etc., etc. So it could be a mixture of both, but ultimately that doesn't really matter. What matters is that whatever these feelings that you're having or experiencing are, they are coming from the inside out. So, for example, you and I could both sit watching a movie. Okay, we could be sat watching a film that is about somebody dying, for example. Now, I could sit there and be crying and find it really, really sad, to the point where I might even think, oh, I don't know if I can watch this anymore. It's making me feel really sad. Okay, so then the person next to me watching the same movie could be sat there laughing. I'm thinking, how can you even laugh at this film? It's awful. Now, it's not because they're a horrible person, but they're experiencing the film differently. So I might be experiencing it with thoughts like, oh, this is really sad. Oh, I don't want that person to die. Imagine how their family would feel. Imagine if that was me. Imagine if that was my friend. Imagine, oh, sad thoughts, sad thoughts, sad thoughts creates lots of sad feelings. Now, my husband, for example, might be watching the same film, and he has quite a logical, I think he might be on this watching, but anyway, like more of a logical, he does this annoying thing actually, where when we're watching a film, he'll like, point out the discrepancies, like, oh, that person had a different coat on in that 2 minutes ago, that's a, so where they do the scenes wrong almost, or whatever you call it, the contingency stuff. So he's looking for that. So he's not feeling sad, not because he's a horrible person, but because he's just laughing, because he's either, oh, that's a really bad actor, or he'd be like, what other series was it that I saw that person in? There was something else, and he'll sit for half the film trying to work out who that person is. So he's not got any sad thinking about it, because his thinking is elsewhere. So he doesn't experience the same sad feelings. It's like, again, if anyone's when I know, I don't really watch scary films now, but when I was younger, there's that thing of, oh, well, even though we know that it's actors and actresses and that it's not real. So Freddy Krueger was the one that was out around when I was younger. I used to say, oh, it's awful. I knew he didn't exist, but it would still scare me, because I'd be having lots of scared thinking whilst watching that film. And I'd always kind of say, oh, well, actually, if I'm going to get to sleep tonight, I'm going to have to watch something nice before I go to bed. And that would work. And the reason that would work is because that would completely divert my thinking to something much nicer and much more positive. So, okay, let's have a look. I don't even know where to start. All right, okay, but yeah, Ilona, I love that you've put there, because I know that you have been following the page for quite a while, and that you are now obviously quite aware of the 3 principles. And you're right, it eventually clicks with you just like a light bulb moment. It is. It's like we have insights as we go along when we start to realize this stuff. So in answer to Anne-Marie's question about, so how do we change our thinking? Well, we don't, because actually we already have the capacity to think something and to let it go. So thoughts are transient. They come and they go. They come and they go. What's happening when we get into a spiral of anxious thinking is we're holding on to those, and we're questioning them. So I think it was in a Michael Neal podcast recently. I really liked, and I use this a lot with young people to explain. I really like the idea that he said that it's like the difference between using a full stop and a comma. So we can't control our thoughts. And I know lots of people say, oh, I just need to start controlling my thoughts, just need to stop. Well, you'll be trying for a long time, because part of human nature is having thoughts. Part of human nature is having random thoughts, scary thoughts, dark thoughts, weird thoughts, happy thoughts, fun thoughts. We have the whole range. That's what we do as humans. And so we can't control that first thought that comes in, but we can then have a choice of what we do with it, how much we try and hold on to it, and how much I found the way I was holding on to thoughts and getting stuck in anxious cycles was I wanted to figure it all out. So say I was anxious for an hour, then suddenly I was okay. It wasn't enough for me that I then felt okay. I didn't just accept that my mood and my thinking had changed and shifted. I couldn't accept that. I would then spend that hour of what would be now classed for me as like peace of mind. I would spend that hour wondering why the hour before I was the way that I was. So I was just creating a whole load more anxious thinking for myself. Whereas the more you start to understand the true nature of thought and overthinking, what happens is you stop questioning it. You just realize on some level that it's just part of human nature. You don't need to know why 2 hours ago you were anxious. It's gone now. It's past. It will always pass. But we can get into a real habit of, but why? But why? Working it out. I need to work it out. So sometimes it can be frustrating learning about these principles. And sometimes people will come to me and say, yeah, but I can't do it. I need to know how to do it. And I probably am frustrating them by saying, okay, there's no set way of how to stop thought. But actually, if you keep learning how thought works, it will just automatically lessen of its own accord, basically, which sounds a bit too good to be true, but it really does work like that. So that was what I was going to say. I've lost track then. So this thing about full stops and commas is, you know, say for example, so someone mentioned health anxiety. Say for example, you have like a little pain in your chest or in your stomach or a twinge somewhere, and you can kind of, the thought will come, oh, that's uncomfortable, or oh, I've got a pain in my chest, that's unusual. Now, that pain may then pass very quickly, and it's nothing, it's just a twinge. You know, there's certain times in the month, particularly for women, where you can have twinges and pains in places that, you know, that you wouldn't normally have. And again, that's fine. There's lots of things going on in our bodies that we're totally unaware of. Now, when you have that thought, yes, it might be a bit uncomfortable. So it might be a bit like, oh, I don't like that. You know, I don't like the fact that I had that pain. And then we leave it there because it goes. Now, if you continue to have pain and that kept coming and coming, then obviously you're going to potentially want to do something about it. But more often than not, people are getting caught up in anxious thinking, particularly around health, with something that's very quick and very instant and goes quickly. But what's happening is, rather than putting a full stop after, oh, that was a weird pain, that was a bit uncomfortable, full stop, what you're doing is you're using lots of commas instead. Oh, that was a bit uncomfortable, comma, oh, I wonder why it's doing that, comma, oh, I wonder if there's maybe something wrong with me. Oh, actually, I remember feeling a bit like this last week. Oh, I remember hearing that story about somebody who 10 years ago had that pain and then this happened, comma, and we keep going on and on and on. And all that's then doing, say for example, you did have a twinge in your chest, that's more likely to then tighten all of this area up and create more, discomfort. So it's kind of like learning to just put a full stop after thoughts that you're uncomfortable with. So again, for me, if I have a thought of, you know, oh, I feel anxious, then I just kind of put the full stop now. I feel anxious. You know, I know it will pass. It always does. And what am I going to do? You know, I know it's come from my thinking. And again, I can say this really easily now. Oh, so what? You know, one of the things I say to people, the biggest change for me in learning more about human nature and thought is that I don't fear it. I used to be petrified of becoming anxious. So even when I wasn't anxious, I may as well have been, because I was worried about the next time. And as I say, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get anxious, but I'm just really not that fussed by it, because I know and I understand now that it's just going to go, and it's created by me in the first place through my thinking. So let me just check if I've got any. Feel free to post any questions that you have. I like it when there's people that have used the 3 principles or learned about them and then realize that it's like a light bulb moment, because again, people are like, how long will it take for me to get it? And it's just like, I've had clients that have got it way quicker than I have, because it's not a case of saying, oh, well, this person's intelligent or emotionally intelligent or anything. You know, I trained for 4 years to be a psychotherapist. You would imagine I would be pretty emotionally literate. I am, to a degree, on paper. But that's very different to seeing something, especially when you've spent a lot of years. What happens when you spend a lot of time feeling anxious, overwhelmed, overthinking things, is that you can really start to distrust your own body and your own self, and thinking that, you know, things are just going to happen to you. And, you know, people will think it's the time of year that makes you feel like that, that it's when you're around certain people, you know, when you've done too much of X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is. And none of that is true, because, you know, there's things like, let me think, well, I don't know if anyone has any examples, but there'll be certain scenarios where, oh, this is a scenario, again, I don't know if my husband is online, he's going to be a bit mortified if he is, but never mind. Hazard of the Job, love, if you're watching. So he is an accountant, and at the end of every month, he is usually quite okay. Oh, someone's writing a question. I'll wait till you. Yeah, if you, I think you're going to write a little bit more, so I'll come back to that in a second. The end of every month, he is more busy and will do a little bit of work from home, and maybe will just turn up from work a bit later and all of that stuff, which is fine. It's part of the job. That's his responsibility and what he needs to do. Not a problem. Now, depending on my mood and my perception and my thoughts, I can see it very differently. And I have very clearly seen it differently on numerous occasions where I can see him up working late and I can really feel compassionate and grateful for how hard he works, and compassionate for the fact that he's, working harder and he's tired and all of that sort of stuff. To the point where I'm kind of not feeling sorry for him, but yeah, feeling like really appreciative of how hard he works. Now, another month, depending on my mood and my consciousness awareness, or depending on where I'm at, he's doing the same thing as he does every month. He's on the computer, even in the same room, he's the same person, everything's the same, except I can start to think, oh, I'm going to bed on my own again tonight. Great. Oh, he puts work before me. He's more interested in work than he is in me. Or, yeah. So I can have a very different experience of what he's doing depending on what I'm thinking. So it's nothing to do with the fact that he's working late that affects my feelings. It's my perception of it and my thoughts about that situation that create my feelings as to whether I go to bed feeling very grateful for a hardworking husband, or going to bed feeling pissed off because I'd rather he was coming to bed and not on the computer all night. That is completely and utterly down to me and my thinking. That's nothing to do with him. So, it doesn't seem to have come up yet, Laura. So I don't know if you're still typing. It can be a little bit delayed. Let's have a look. I'll see if it comes up. Has anyone else got any questions for me? I feel like I'm rambling on. I give those examples of that example then of my husband, for, of how I can see things very differently. And that's kind of what insights are. So we start to notice discrepancies in our thinking. We start to notice that actually I feel really bad right now because of that person. And then we start to think, well, actually, that person was doing that same thing 4 weeks ago, and I didn't feel bad at all about that. So then we start to realize the inside out nature of all of this stuff, and that actually we are experiencing everything through our own thoughts and our own perceptions. And it can be frustrating and annoying for people actually to, if I keep harping on about that it's inside out, that it's like sometimes we want to blame people, sometimes we want to be cross with people, and actually sometimes we will. Like I'm sat here now saying to you all about this inside out. There are times where I very much see it the other way around. I know on some level now that that's not true, so I won't stay in that place for as long, but I do still go into it where it's like, oh yeah, but if they just didn't do that, then I'd be all right. But actually it's very freeing to start to realize that it's not other things making us, because that's when you don't need to then you then don't need to be living in fear of it, because you realize it's just created through thinking. Okay. Okay, so just following on from the anxious versus depressed feeling, I lost my mum in February. I'm sorry to hear that. And at the time I dealt with it, it was a massive shock, and I feel like now 6 months later it's hit me more. It comes out in me as anxiety, depression. I just don't know how to overcome how I'm feeling, as I know I can't change the situation. I know I need to carry on and live my life, but just struggling to get past this bit. I just don't know that I don't feel like me. Okay, so I'm not surprised you don't feel like you, because you've had a huge life-changing event that's happened, a really sad, traumatic, horrible thing that's happened. Now, when people say, and I will hear people saying, I dealt with it. Like, do we really ever fully deal with the loss of someone? Yeah, my dad died 10 years ago. I still have days or moments where I feel desperately sad about that. That's normal. That's perfectly okay. And again, this is a bit like when we talk about mental health, what people do is like we will attach things to it. So if someone's grieving, then yeah, they might get depressed. Well, actually, if someone's grieving, they're probably having quite a lot of depressed thoughts because they're really deeply missing this person on a really, really deep level. So, of course, you're going to have really sad thoughts, and that's going to create lots of really sad feelings. So, that is totally normal. And in a way, what I would say is allow yourself to be still really early days, like really super early days. And, you know, all I would say is there's nothing about, you don't need to overcome these feelings just right now. You just need to become comfortable with that discomfort, if that makes sense. So allow yourself, be more compassionate towards yourself in that it's kind of like, well, of course I feel like this. You know, I've got a lot of thinking about my mum and that I've lost her. And that's then creating those feelings. You know, there's nothing wrong in that. And don't be creating a story in your head that that's then going to make you depressed. Like you can have depressed thoughts about somebody that you've lost that you really cared about. Like that's perfectly normal. And to say that you will carry on and live your life, yes, and you are doing, because you're right, you have no choice. And this is another thing, like our mind and our wisdom just takes over. We will survive and we will manage because it's what we do as humans. We're fantastic. But actually, that doesn't mean that that's not going to come without struggle, because you're still going to have a lot of thoughts about your mum. And, all sorts of, I don't know the situations, but why, how, all of that stuff that you can ask yourself is going to keep you in that spiral of thinking. So if anything, as I was saying earlier, I don't know how soon you came on the call, but if not, go back and listen to the beginning. It's a bit like this full stop, I am feeling really sad and scared or whatever it is about the fact that I've lost my mum. Full stop. Of course you are. That is completely fine and normal. But then if you start adding the commas, like, and I should be over this by now, when I thought I was okay last month, now this month I'm not, what is it I've done? I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Well, if you will start adding all that, excuse my French, shit on top, that's just creating a load of extra stress and worry that you really don't need and don't deserve and don't need to have. So allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling about it. So again, I could listen to a song or pass somewhere that reminds me of my dad, instantly go straight into my thinking. I can have feelings that feel just as sad as the week that he died, because if I think and get so engrossed so much into that thought, the feelings feel extremely real. Like I was saying before about watching a scary movie, we know that's not real. We know it's not happening right in that moment, but we can create feelings through our thinking that feel very real in that moment. So it's the same with loss. We can feel almost like it's happening all over again, depending on the thoughts that we're having and how much we're going into it. So if you're wanting to feel less overwhelmed, then allow yourself to be sad about that, but put your full stop. You're feeling sad about it. You don't have to explain to anybody why. You don't have to, none of that. It doesn't matter. It's completely understandable. And the more you just allow that, the easier it will feel. But it's very, very early days. Okay, so let's have a look. You wake up as soon in the morning, anxious, fear. Why is it as soon as I wake up? Well, we do have higher adrenaline levels naturally as soon as we wake up. That gives us that boost. So if you're already a little bit on edge, you may be having lots of anxious thinking in your dreams. It's a spiral, but the less you overanalyze it. So again, the questions you're asking me, why is it when it's this? Why is it this? Why is it that? All of those whys is what's keeping you in that anxious thinking. So maybe just imagine if you just experience, go, oh, I just get anxious as soon as I wake up. Mornings are my worst. That's how it is. It doesn't always have to be like that, but the more comfortable you become with that's just how it is at the moment, you might find it passes actually a lot quicker. It's very difficult to break a cycle when you have had a trauma or continuous stress for a number of years. I can't remember what it feels like to not be anxious, which is worrying. Okay, Claire, what I would say about that is I can personally relate to feeling like that it would never change. But the amount of times you've experienced something, amount of time, it does not equal, that does not mean that you then equally have to, it takes that amount of time to recover. That's just not true. It's more about once you get it, you get it. And as I say, you know, interestingly, young people, when I teach young people these principles, they seem to get them really quickly and have insights way quicker than we do. And I think that's because they're just quite happy to let stuff go, and they're listening almost through fresher ears. So especially when you've experienced something and you think you know how everything is in your mind, you're probably not listening. I think I've done a video somewhere else in here, I'll try and dig it out, about how we really listen to something new. And, you know, because I trained as a therapist, when I started hearing all of this stuff, I'm like, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And that's not really hearing something new. So what I would say to you is the biggest thing is being open to the idea that actually it could be completely different. You know, I hope, you know, as myself and lots of other people that I've worked with and lots of other people that coach these principles all over the world, that have the most amazing case studies of people who thought they were completely and utterly broken and that they were going to be like this for the rest of their lives, completely turning everything around, because we have that capability and that capacity. As we just need to stop kind of buying into that story that that's how we're going to be. I get that it's difficult, like honestly, I have been there. And it is a habit and a cycle that you are breaking, but actually it's not as difficult as what we think sometimes. So someone there, yes, relating some losing a parent. I fainted once with anxiety, and now anytime I even feel off balance, I get anxious. It happens on a daily basis. You see, that's really interesting, because I can remember once speaking to a nurse or a doctor who said you can't actually faint from a panic attack. So some people believe it's impossible to faint from a panic attack. Now, this is kind of another example of where we want to figure it all out and we want to work it out to almost try and reassure ourselves. But by trying to reassure ourselves, we're creating lots more anxious thinking. Because actually, how do you not know that you weren't maybe slightly feverish or something, or your blood pressure had changed dramatically, or something else fluky was happening in your body at that time? Because there's lots of people who have anxiety and panic who've never ever fainted. I've probably had hundreds of panic attacks. I've never ever fainted once. So it's not something that you can attach it to that. But what if it was nothing to do with that? Now, it might have been, it might not. And again, we never know. You know, we never ever know. We never have all the answers. You know, you could go and sit in front of 10 psychotherapists, 10 psychiatrists, and they'd all have probably a different opinion on that. And I'm very much now like, I'll give lots of different sides of the opinion, because I want you to see that there are lots of different ways we can look at it. I don't have the answer. I don't really believe that you have the answer either, because it's very difficult for us to know. We can feel like it was because of that. And the reason we feel it was because of that is because we're thinking very clearly that that's what it was. Yeah. So again, that thought about that's what it was is creating that feeling of that's what happened and I don't like it. And I'd also just like to say that, you know, you're on here, you've put a comment on, you're there, like you've survived it. Yeah. And you're okay. And again, we can feel off balance for lots of different reasons. And yes, feeling off balance can be, the more you're overthinking it, the more off balance you're going to feel. But again, your mind and wisdom will kick in. If you're going to feel all wobbly, you're going to sit down. Yeah, you're going to. I've had it where I was at the till in a shop, and it was only probably like last year actually, and I just all of a sudden felt that horrendous feeling where your vision starts to go. I felt really hot and sweaty, and thought, I'm going to have to sit down because I'm going to pass out. And I was on my own with my daughter, so then I was panicking about her. And actually, you know, I could then go back and go, oh, do you know what if I wonder if I was like panicking there at that till for some reason, and why would I be panicking? Because it felt very much like panic in that horrible sweaty, you know, where you just don't, you feel like you've left your body almost a little bit. And actually now I wouldn't even bother trying to figure that out, because I know that I could think of 101 different scenarios and still that might not be the actual reason. You don't know, you know. And then if somebody's obviously fainting all the time, they're going to go to the doctors and get themselves checked out. But wondering, you know, just wonder whether you know, maybe if you could think about it slightly differently and experience that actually, what if What if that was nothing to do with your anxiety and something else was going on in your body, and then worrying about that was then creating anxious thinking, and it was all mixed in? Like, we'll never really know. So in a way, we're kind of wasting our time trying to figure it out. Okay, so yeah, fear of dying. I did a video somewhere on that as well, on the page somewhere. There's loads of videos on the page if anyone wants to, that I'm referring to. And also, if you put your email in and get that half-an-hour video, if you want to email me, when you get that, if you want to reply back to the email and tell me what it is specifically that you know, I can basically send you the link to the video. It can be very hard to accept that those awful, overwhelming feelings are coming from our own thinking, because it feels like blame, or it did to me at first. This is another 3P. I was quite indignant, like you were saying, it was my fault. I was like, no, it's because I have depression, anxiety, because I lost my mum, and because I experienced trauma as a child. Easy to blame external things, but now I know that saying it's from my thinking isn't saying it's my fault. Absolutely. I didn't understand how it worked. Now I'm learning. We're all just doing what we can to get by. Absolutely. We're doing what we feel is best in that moment. And it doesn't mean that because we experience those horrible things that we can't, you know, that, oh, we'll just get on with it. It's gone now. It's in the past. No, it doesn't work like that. But we can think about it, and we can have feelings about it, and then we can make that even bigger and struggle with it. So there's a big difference. And I know that Emma is someone who is really getting to grips with this stuff, so that's brilliant. Okay, yeah. So someone's saying here about going to the doctor for tests and saying you feel fine for a while, but then it comes back again. Yeah, because it's probably triggered by your overthinking. So the times where you're not feeling quite so bad, you're probably not as up in your head and not as thinking as much. But, you know, if you've been to the doctors and they've done tests and they say that you're okay, then, you know, go from that place. And again, just trusting that actually if there really was something wrong, the body would show you in another way. It's really clever. It just does. So let's have a look. So if anyone has any more questions, then please feel free to pop them in. And if not, I will love you and leave you. As I say, if you want to learn a little bit more about the 3 principles, there's a brief half-an-hour video that I can send on email. So yeah, so I suppose one of the things that I would, if anyone could take away from tonight, is what you think you know at the moment about your mental health, what you think is your story, what you think is your way of being. What if you went away from this tonight just considering, like, no pressure, but just considering, what if it wasn't that way? What if actually you got it wrong? What if the way you thought of yourself and described yourself and saw yourself was not truth, was not accurate, and just your actual perception of what you think? Because I know that you'll see yourself differently at different times. I mean, even visually, and sometimes you can look in the mirror. I can look in the mirror and go, God, you're looking ugly today. And then other days I can go, oh, you don't look too bad. You know, even visually, we have distorted views depending on our mood. And if we're frustrated and things are getting on top of us, we maybe are going to have more anxious thinking. So yeah, so just if you could just, if there's anything to take away, just ponder, don't overthink it, but just reflect on, what if it doesn't have to be that way? What if actually underneath those thoughts and feelings of anxiety or depression, there was a whole person that was more than capable of enjoying life and being content? So yeah, there's no more questions, so I'm going to leave it there. So thank you so much for joining me. If anybody watches the recording of this, you can still pop questions in. I'll try and get back to you when I can. And I'd love it if you would share the video. There's so many people out there that think they're completely broken, and I would just love for the message to be spread that we're not broken, we are innately well, and half the time we're just trying too bloody hard to fix ourselves. So yeah, so I'm going to leave that there, and I will speak to you all very soon. Bye.